All right, so next culture in international foods is going to be India, and this is a quite large food culture, right? So we might split these lectures up into 2 weeks and only focus on some simple ideas today, and maybe some more specific dishes next week. But let's get right into it. Okay, so first thing to know is India is in South Asia, all right, and it's a very old civilization. There's been many different influences over the years, and many different types of people and religions that came through this region. So it's really important to know that, right? So if we look here, we'll see it's in South Asia. There's close proximity to China. There's close proximity to the Middle East, and there's close proximity to Southeast Asia as well. So all those things are going to be prevalent, not only from India spreading influence to those areas, but also those areas spreading influence back. Okay. If we look on the right side of this slide, you can see a lot of information about the different types of religions in India. It's a pretty religiously diverse area. Obviously, Buddhism started in India, and there's still some underlining things about that, but it really became popularized in China. But it is important to know that Buddhism did start in India. Christianity is also popular in certain areas. Hinduism, of course, is the main religion, I would say, in India, and we can find many Hindu people in the whole subcontinent, that whole Indo-Chinese subcontinent part of Asia. There's a lot of Hindu people, right? But we can also see there's a pretty strong Islamic or Muslim influence as well. So Islam would be the second most popular religion in India, and both those religions have some restrictions on things you can eat. So in Hinduism, the cow is sacred, so you don't eat beef. In Islam, pork is haram or banned, right? Not accepted. So they don't eat pork, right? And there's also halal, right? So there's two sides of that as well. So those religions are going to affect how people eat. There's also the Sikh people. A lot of people call it Sikh. It's Sikh, Sikhism, or Sikhs, right? So there is in the northwest a heavy population of Sikh people as well. Okay, so just goes to show very religiously diverse area, lots of different types of people, lots of different types of civilization over time have had influence on this part of the world. Okay, when we talk about India, we need to understand that there are a lot of cooking techniques that are very common in that area, and a lot of them can be attributed to those all those different influences that we talked about, right? So they have a different style of wok that's a little shallower, but they have woks, right? So there are stir-fried dishes, there are things that are fried in woks, things that are steamed in woks. So they use the wok as well, obvious Chinese influence. Um, Also, from the older times, they have earthenware like clay pots, right? So those things are really important for natural steaming or simmering of foods, right? You'll see a lot of griddled food, right? So this is a griddle, one flat iron surface with a heating element underneath. Um, you'll see a lot of griddled breads, griddled egg dishes, lots of things like that in India. And then we'll also see a lot of deep fat frying, right? This is a thing that's pretty synonymous with the Middle East. Um, in India, there used to be a saying or an idea that there wasn't a lot of oil being used because it was rather expensive in that part of the world. But now we do see a ton of fried food in India. It is quite common. In your study guide, you're going to see some specific different words they have for different types of cooking techniques and a lot of really good information about that. But just be aware there's a wide array, and they're all based on their history as well as some of those influences, right? The wok, the earthenware stuff, the frying, all those things. Okay. But I would say the most important part or cooking tool in Indian history or Indian food is the tandoori oven or the tandoor, right? Um, it's a clay lined steel vessel and it's heated from the bottom with charcoal, right? Traditionally, you could see things like skewered meat getting dropped in there, or you can see right here, you'll use the sides of the oven to cook breads, right? So it is what we call hearth cookery, which basically just means it's fire cooked and with earthenware, right? This is clay and it's charcoal, so it's an old style of cooking and imparts a really distinct flavor, right? Anytime you cook over wood, it's going to be delicious. Anytime you cook with earthenware, it's going to add extra flavor, right? So those things are really important. Um, so it used to just start with the skewers, but now almost anything can be cooked in a tandoor oven, from fish to poultry to bread and vegetables. Um, as time has progressed, it's become a really, really important part of Indian cooking. Okay. So bread is huge. We can trace back this style of flatbread was really invented by the Persian civilization, right? So we'll see a lot of flatbreads in the Persian cuisine, right? Culinary heritage. But obviously, through influence back and forth, it made its way to other parts of Asia. But I would say the people that have done the most with that style of flatbread has been the Indian cuisine, right? There are tons of different types of Indian roti, which are breads. Um, and here are a few. A lot of us have seen naan before. That is a Persian word for bread. So there's a little direct combination right there. But there's also different types. You'll see the pulka is the same thing as the chapati, but it's puffed up through steam, and then the chapati is just a baked piece of flatbread. The paratha is a layered bread that is that's fried, really similar to like a Chinese scallion pancake kind of texture, right? But we'll see tons and tons of different types of Indian flatbreads. A lot are unleavened, meaning there's no yeast in there, but there are for sure a bunch of yeasted varieties. Some breads are griddled, some are stuffed with things and fried, some are thrown straight onto hot cinders and puff up like the polka. If that was hot stones, it would do the same thing. That's just a gas range. Um, and then some are cooked in a tandoor, like naan. Like if we go back, um, we can see that's naan being cooked in the tandoori oven. All right. So again, this is like a main accompaniment of food. There's usually always bread at the table. Okay. The other one is rice. And specifically in India, we're going to talk about basmati rice, which is a long grain type of rice, and it's very aromatic. It's known for its aroma, right? So rice is a major staple to Indian cuisine for over half its population. There are many ways for it to be cooked in India. It's not just boiled. If we look here, we see biryani, which again is Persian influence, but you won't find the type of biryani you see in India compared to the type of rice dishes you'll see in Iran present day, because India uh, is very well known for its use of spices, right? That's the big thing when we talk about Indian food is they are masters, and I mean absolute masters. They are the number one food culture when it comes to using spices. They've done it for the longest amount of time, and they have the most amount of different techniques using them. So, if you ever heard of rice pilaf, that is um, an American or a Western term for how Persian people cook rice, which is you either cook it with meat or it's mixed in with vegetables and aromatics, right? Um, Biryani is the Indian version of that, which is like meat or vegetables and rice and tons of spices and aromatics. It's used either as a main dish or an accompaniment as well. But you will always or very often see rice as a side dish in Indian food or the main starch, right? Specifically basmati rice. It can be flavored with saffron sometimes, which is a little stamen. Very, it's I think it's the most expensive food by weight in the world, but it's the very colorful stamen of a specific type of flour that imparts a really good color. You'll see that yellow things; those have been and yellow here. That's saffron. Um, oh, you can even see a little bit here. Those little red specks. Those are little stamens of saffron. More worth more by weight than gold, I believe, because you there's only three on each flower. You have to pick them off one by one. So rice is huge, huge. All right. Another thing is dals. Dals are any type of like legume or lentil or bean. They can be, when they're cooked, they can either be whole or pureed, and they're a very common dish or accompaniment in Indian cuisine. They've evolved over the centuries. There's a lot of different types of dals. The generic term dal can mean a variety of all these different types of things. Um, Dals can be made repetitiously every day, and it'll never get boring because there's a huge amount of permutations and combinations that you can do with obviously different aromatics and spices to flavor it, but obviously again with the different types of dals. These are just some. This is one picture I just randomly found, but I know there's way more than just these. Okay. This is a great protein source for people who may have a vegetarian diet. The highest caste in the Hindu religion, the Brahmin people, are vegetarians, right? So they don't eat meat. And we'll see that they eat a lot of dals because it's a great source of protein. Um, some of you may know from like a health class that rice and beans together create a complete protein, which will have all the amino acids you need necessary to nourish you. So dals are a great version of that. Okay, so meat again in India. Let's just use our brains based on the type of people. There'll be different things. Beef is by far the least common thing you'll probably find because Hinduism is so prevalent. Um, and pork is also not very common too because the Islamic people or the Muslim people are also quite prevalent throughout the country. So what do we see a lot? We see a lot of chicken. Okay, chicken is very common. Also, like things like duck or goose or game birds like partridge. Lots of different types of poultry in India for sure. But we'll also see tons of lamb, tons of goat, things like that, and things like lamb, which is older. When lamb gets older, over a year old, it's called mutton. So you'll see some mutton, and you'll see goat. Those are pretty strong flavors. So the spices do a great job to actually cover up some of that gaminess, especially with things like partridge and goose and duck and things like that. So that's another way that the flavor profile lends itself to working with the ingredients they have or that they use willingly. Um, Gamey or game meats, things that are wild, usually have a pretty strong blood flavor or irony flavor because they're not regulated in a farm, right? They're normal animals that run around and use their muscles. So there's blood in their muscles, and you can taste that. And those aromatics really help balance out that flavor, right? Remember that element of balance. So India has a giant coast, right? Therefore, obviously, we're going to see seafood. India has a coastline of over 2,500 miles. There's the Arabian Sea, there's the Indian Ocean, there's the Bay of Bengal that's on the shores, and they provide thousands of varieties of fish. Okay, so when we talk about southern India, you're going to see a lot of different types of seafood dishes. Really common are prawns or shrimp, from like little teeny ones to gigantic, massive prawns that can be up to a pound. They're used in curries, they're baked, they're stir fried, they're roasted, they're cooked in tandoors. There's lots of different ways to cook Indian prawns. We'll definitely see a lot of prawns, right? Another fish that India is famous for is the pomfret, which is it's a kind of high end, firm fleshed flatfish, right? It's often stuffed and roasted or fried or wrapped in a banana leaf and baked or steamed. Um, you'll see a lot of times that this will be cooked with a banana leaf, and that banana leaf will impart a pretty deep flavor. You'll see banana leaf used in all of South and Southeast Asia. You'll see banana leaf in the Caribbean and Latin America. It's a quite unique aromatic that can be used to wrap a food, encapsulate it so that it steams on the inside and impart a really delicious flavor. And another one that's really important is the Bombay duck, which is actually a fish, a bombole fish, but it's much more commonly referred to as Bombay duck. They're caught in big quantities. They're caught in nets, just massive amounts of Bombay duck. They're kind of weird looking fishes. Maybe I can show you a fresh version in class. Um, but usually they're dried They're sun dried and provide a really cost effective form of protein. Um, in the West, we mainly think of it as an accompaniment for curries, but in India, it's made into many dishes, both in dried form and in fresh form. Okay, so Bombay duck is really important. Okay, so oils. There's a lot of flavored oils that are used in Indian cooking. That's common in the Middle East. It's common in South Asia. It's common in Southeast Asia, and it's common in East Asia. Okay, so these are like four of the main ones. Ground nut oil, which is basically like peanut oil, which we see a lot in Asia, is used very commonly for frying. Right, it's a great oil for frying. It can hold high heat and it imparts a really good flavor. We'll also see sesame oil for flavoring, mustard seed oil for flavoring, which is actually, I believe, mustard oil is illegal in America, as far as I know. Maybe that's old news. Maybe it's different now, but I know back in the day you weren't allowed to import mustard oil. And then coconut oil, okay, because obviously it's kind of a tropical climate in some areas, and there's going to be coconuts growing. Okay, so aside from spices, oils, flavored oils are a great way to impart and influence the flavor, and their use varies from region to region. In your study guide, there's a lot of specific information about where they use what type of oil and things like that. Okay, but moving on, we're going to dairy next. So we'll see a lot of dairy in India. Okay, way more than we saw in East Asia or Southeast Asia. This will be one of the first places that we talk about that has a strong use of dairy. We'll see sheep's milk, goat's milk, cow milk, or even buffalo milk, right? All those things are pretty common. And one of the most important staples in Indian food is ghee, which is clarified butter, right? It's you basically kind of boil butter to the point where the milk solids and the butter fat itself separate, and then they filter it. So it's just straight butter fat. It can hold a higher heat than butter can. It's not going to burn, but it's going to impart all those flavors that butter does. Um, Clarified butter is super common in things like French food or even American food. Food in the West uses clarified butter, and India is really known for clarified butter, which they call ghee, right? Um, Yogurt is huge because it is a preserved form of dairy, right? It has been controlled rot, basically, right? It's controlled bacterial growth that turns it into yogurt that makes it a little bit more stable. Yogurt can be made from sheep's milk, goat's milk, cow's milk, or buffalo milk. Yogurt in this part of the world is a lot more rich and fatty than we think of yogurt in the West, right? If you ever had Greek yogurt, full fat Greek yogurt, it's more similar to that than what type of yogurt you would find in a store here in America, right? Full fat, lots of flavor. I don't eat yogurt unless it's this style of yogurt where it's full fat, very creamy, very thick. Okay, I think it just tastes way better. They use yogurt in a lot of different things. It can be in chutneys, which we're going to talk about later. It can be used in all their different curries, quote unquote. Remember, curry doesn't really mean anything, but it does explain somewhat a technique of a range of foods. So they can use yogurt to cool down foods and add some fat to it, or it can just be eaten by itself or as an accompaniment with things. If you ever had a mango lassi, right? They use yogurt to make drinks too, sweet drinks or savory drinks. Um, in this part of the world, you also see like carbonated yogurt beverages, right? So yogurt is used a lot, a lot, a lot. It's a main flavoring component in Indian food. And then the last one I think is important is paneer, which is their form of cheese. It's a semi-firm, it's unmelting cheese that's used in many dishes. So you can like fry it and it's not going to melt. It's really squeaky and chewy. It has a pretty good texture and it's a good carrier for flavor. It's a type of cheese that's made through acidulation, right? So usually it's just like milk and lemon juice or something or vinegar to make it coagulate, and then it'll be pressed into those blocks. Um, Therefore, it doesn't have like the funk of a ripened cheese that's been allowed to age for a long time. This is a fresh cheese, right? Which means you can make it immediately. You can cook it, strain it, press it all in one day, and you can use it 8 hours later or the next day. So it's a quick made cheese, and it doesn't melt. That's the important thing. All right, so chutneys. There are a lot of chutneys, which are like condiments used to accompany food and help flavor things. Right? You can have chutneys with bread. You can have chutneys with your stews or your rice dishes or your baked foods or your fried foods, whatever. Chutney is basically a sweet and sour condiment. Generally, right? There are some that are different, that are more spicy or more yogurt based, but they're a condiment usually made of fruit, vegetables, or herbs that are commonly cooked in vinegar with sugar and spices. Most times when we think of chutney, we're going to think of something that has like a jammy consistency, right? Something a little bit sweet and sticky. But there's also, like, if we look, there's a lot of herb based ones that are a little more savory, or some thicker pureed ones that aren't like sticky, right? But for the most part, they're cooked down with sugar until it becomes syrupy and highly concentrated with the flavor of the spices and the aromatic ingredients that are in there, right? So we'll see lots of different types of chutneys in your study guide. I explain, I think, like 8 to 10 different kinds, and that's just a few. There's a lot more than just that. But anytime you go to an Indian restaurant, look around, you'll probably see some chutney either just come with your food or you can for sure always order it. All right, sweets are huge. Okay, this is the first time that we're really going to focus on desserts or sweet things, um, mainly because this part of the world, from South Asia to the Middle East, is really, really known for their confectionaries. Um, in South Asia and in the Middle East, desserts and sweet things are extremely sweet, really high sugar content. Okay, it's just their flavor profile. So if you have a dessert, an Indian dessert, it's usually cloyingly sweet, almost cloyingly sweet, extremely sweet. All right, they use granulated sugar, but they also use this right here, which is called jaggery. It's in your study guide, and it's made from sugar cane. Okay, so similar to palm sugar, they're gonna take the sugar cane juice, they're gonna boil it down until it's really thick, and then they're gonna dry it in molds. And you can use it almost exactly the same way you can use palm sugar, right? Um, those are some important points. There's lots of different types of sweets in your study guide, but like a couple that I think are important are the jalebi, which is like basically Indian funnel cake, right? That's kind of like a fried funnel cake soaked in a usually a saffron and rosewater syrup. Which saffron and rosewater, those are very Persian things again. That's again that Persian influence. But we'll find this in both those countries, Iran and India. You're going to definitely see this. Gulab jamun, which is a kind of a dough ball soaked again in that in like rose water syrup, right? So it's extremely sweet. It has that rose flavor, and lots of sugar. Okay, lots of sugar. We'll see lots of pistachio. We'll see lots of nuts and rose water and things like that. Orange blossom water, and also things like coconut. Right, lots of different types of Indian sweets. It's a really important part of the cuisine. Okay, so flavorings of Indian food. We haven't talked about it yet, but it is the most important part of Indian food. Is their use of spices is extremely prevalent. So most dishes are seasoned by a blend or a combination of whole and or ground spices. And the way the spices are toasted and cooked are really intently done. So there's you will see in the next slide. There's different ways of preparing your spice blends um, based on the dish. So the combinations are straight up infinite, right? There's a lot of different types of spices, got a lot of different types of spice blends, and it's just based on personal taste or region or culture, right? Each cook is going to have a different preference, but the basic principle of Indian cooking is that no one spice is going to overpower the other. Again, masterful use of spices. This is the prevalent number one food culture when it comes to using spices. That's really important to know. And let's see how they use them, okay? So we're going to talk about masalas, which are spice blends. Um, one thing that's important to know is they can be dry. Like if we look at garam masala, it's usually just a dry blend of warming spices. That's probably the most common spice blend you'll hear about in Indian food is garam masala. But there can also be wet spice blends. Like think about Thai curry paste, right, where it's blended with aromatics. A wet Indian spice blend can be pulverized with things like ginger and chilies and onions, stuff like that. And that would be a wet spice blend or masala, right? But there's the dry ones, which are just toasted spices, and there's the wet ones, which have aromatics blended into them. So garam masala is huge. It changes based on where you are. It's basically just a warm blend of spices. It's not always one specific recipe. It matters what who is making it, where they are, their family traditions, things like that. But that's kind of a use all spice blend. There's also Panch Phoron, which is Bengali five spice. We've heard of different types of five spice before, right? Remember Chinese five spice, but this is an Indian version, the Bengali five spice, which is cumin, fennel, nigella seeds, fenugreek, and black mustard seeds, right? So that's black mustard right there. That's nigella, which I believe is a seed from an onion or a type of onion, but I will have to double check. I'm not sure if I'm totally right there. So maybe maybe cross-examine that one. And then the last thing is tarka, which is really important and I would say pretty unique to India with the way they use for spices. This is a way of um, infusing spice flavor by slowly warming them in oil. So you'll see like there's things like garlic and chilies and lots of spices in here, and they're going to warm it in oil and kind of fry it until it toasts and becomes really aromatic. And then that can be blended up and added to uh, a meat dish or a stew or whatever to impart the flavor that you want. So this style of infusing spice flavor is really unique to India, I think, and they for sure created this, the tarka. That you're, we'll watch a video. You're basically just deep frying spices and aromatics. It's pretty cool. I wouldn't have thought to do that on my own until I started learning about Indian food. And once you understand that that's another method other than just making your paste and frying it, uh, it's pretty cool. All right, so those are the main building blocks of Indian cuisine. Obviously, you can tell we've talked about no specific dishes or regions yet. There is a lot of information on that stuff in your study guide, and we will go over it. But I think because India has so much information and is such a large food culture, we're gonna maybe go slow and take it over 2 weeks. So for now, let's get really good about understanding what the building blocks and the history is all about, and then maybe next week we'll go into specifics. So yeah, thanks for your time, and I'll talk to you on Monday.